Remembering Reverend Billy Graham,
Christ belongs to all people.
the evangelist who advised presidents and reached millions. Listening session. The White House is talking with survivors of school shootings as students urge Florida lawmakers to act. The Pope and Chile. We have the latest on the Vatican's efforts to listen to sex abuse victims. And stamp of approval. An Olympic gold medalist gets an unusual honor at home. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, February 21st, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The Reverend Billy Graham is dead at the age of 99. Graham passed away at his home in North Carolina. The legendary evangelist ministered for decades, building evangelicalism into a force that rivaled liberal Protestantism and Roman Catholicism in the United States and around the world.
He loves you, willing to forgive you of all your sins.
He was called America's pastor, a minister in the old-time tradition of Southern U.S. Baptists. He built a following worldwide, traveling the globe, taking to the airwaves, as no religious leader had ever done before him. He had no home church, no regular congregation, no church hierarchy, except the one he created. But through radio, television, movies, publishing, and appearances in 185 countries to record-breaking crowds, Graham reached out to hundreds of millions of people. He preached the gospel to try to save the souls of each and every one.
Jesus said there are two roads. There's the broad road that leads to destruction and judgment, and there's the other road that leads to heaven.
Billy Graham was born in 1918 and raised on a dairy farm in Charlotte, North Carolina. A time and a place familiar with traveling preachers who would visit long enough to try to revive the community's faith in Christ. Graham attended a revival meeting when he was 16. He became a minister and launched his own revivals.
I do not believe that any man can solve the problems of life without Jesus Christ.
He called his revival campaigns crusades and made them bigger than any ever seen before.
This stranglehold has got to be broken or this country is going to go down the drain.
He prayed in Russia, China. He prayed in North Korea, Canada, Hungary. And in 2005, he prayed at his last crusade with 200,000 people in New York.
This crowd has been brought together, I believe, by the Spirit of God, using all of us working together.
Billy Graham became a confidant to U.S. presidents from both major political parties. In 1950, Graham made his first visit to the White House. He met and prayed there with Harry Truman, and through the decades with nearly all of his successors, including John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Barack Obama. He also met several times with Pope John Paul II. After JP2 died, Graham wrote he was unquestionably the most influential voice for morality and peace in the world during the last 100 years. And New York's Archbishop Timothy Cardinal Dolan released a statement saying, in part, Billy Graham seemed to be everywhere, always with the same message: Jesus is your Savior and wants you to be happy with Him forever. He added, may the Lord that Billy Graham loved so passionately now grant him eternal rest. President Trump writes, Billy Graham was truly one of a kind. Christians and people of all faiths and backgrounds will miss him dearly. We are thinking of him today and finally at home in heaven. President Trump says we must do more to protect our children. Today, he met with students who survived the Parkland, Florida shooting and others affected by school violence. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. From Florida to the White House, students urge lawmakers and the president to take action on gun control. Even those who could not meet with the president made sure their voices were heard.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
Hundreds of students walked out of their schools around Washington to protest in front of the White House.
We're seeing many people dying and losing their lives, and we trust the school to protect us.
And from D.C. to Florida, they want politicians to do more. Survivors of the Parkland, Florida school shooting took their message to the state capitol.
Within this past week alone, a movement has begun. A movement that demands change at a state and national level.
For questions, debate, and a vote.
Democrats in Tallahassee tried to get a bill banning assault rifles heard on the House floor. Republicans blocked the attempt. Back in D.C., President Trump held a listening session with students today. The White House says he's gathering information and several options are on the table. Trump is a staunch supporter of the National Rifle Association, but he's expressing openness to change, tweeting, "Whether we are Republican or Democrat, we must now focus on strengthening background checks." And yesterday, he ordered Attorney General Jeff Sessions to propose regulations on bump stocks, devices used to turn legal guns into rapid-fire weapons.
I expect that these critical regulations will be finalized, Jeff, very soon.
Tomorrow, the president meets with state governors to discuss further action.
President Trump will make the safety of our nation's schools and students our top priority.
This protester hopes it's more than words.
We feel unsafe in our school. We need to feel safe in our school, and the way to do that is get guns off.
That student told me he's opposed to teens buying guns like the AR-15. The gunman in Florida bought one legally as an 18-year-old. In a White House press briefing, Secretary Sarah Sanders was asked if the president believes in an age limit on AR-15 purchases. She said it hasn't been determined if that should become federal policy, but it is something to discuss. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Many Americans are calling on Congress to pass stricter gun laws. Democrat Chris Murphy from Connecticut says the shooting is a turning point. The pressure seems to be mounting on Republicans to do something. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Gun control often fizzles here on Capitol Hill. One example, a bipartisan push to ban bump stocks after the Las Vegas massacre. That failed. Now, many Catholics may be asking, what guidance does the church offer? Today, I asked a Catholic theologian.
Exactly.
Father Thomas Petrie says there are no easy solutions in the wake of the Florida shooting. He's the dean of the Dominican House of Studies and a frequent contributor to EWTN.
Catholics often want a black or white answer to questions like gun control, but the church doesn't offer such black and white answers to every single issue that faces us as a society. So the issues come down to many principles like the common good. What is good for the people of our country? What is good for the collective without infringing upon the rights of the individual?
Church teaching permits self-defense. The Catechism says someone who defends his life is not guilty of murder, even if he is forced to deal his aggressor a lethal blow. But the Vatican has said limiting the purchase of such arms would certainly not infringe on the rights of anyone. And the United States bishops support common-sense gun laws. Father Petrie says the issue is not just about guns.
Well, I don't believe that it's simply access to firearms. I think, in fact, we live in a culture that loves death and loves violence. And it's from everything from abortion to what students and people are taking in on television to video games.
The issue is indeed complex. Lawmakers will be wrestling with it when they return next week. Republicans have been taking a lot of heat. But it is interesting to note that when Democrats controlled Congress and the White House from 2009 to 2011, they did not pass one gun restriction. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. A new White House policy on security clearances will affect several officials, but not Jared Kushner. That's the president's son-in-law and advisor. He does not have permanent clearance. A new policy going into effect this Friday will restrict those who have only interim access, but the White House says Kushner will continue his work on U.S.-Mexico relations and peace in the Middle East. We're learning a meeting at the Olympics with Vice President Mike Pence and North Korea was on the books and canceled. It was canceled at the last minute by the communist nation. It would have included Kim Jong-un's sister. President Trump had signed off on it as long as the U.S. made clear it wants the country to abandon its nuclear weapons. Israeli security forces used tear gas to disperse Palestinian demonstrators in the West Bank. They were protesting the arrest of an activist in Israel late last year. New airstrikes in the suburbs of Syria's capital kill at least 10 and injure dozens more. This comes on the heels of hundreds who lost their lives over the last few days. The growing casualties are overwhelming paramedics and doctors. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has reaction from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The United States is condemning Syria's government, led by President Bashar Assad. The U.S. says his regime is responsible for the humanitarian disaster in the country. We should warn our viewers, the images you are about to see are graphic. In the last 48 hours, activists say nearly 350 civilians have been killed in the suburbs of Damascus, controlled by rebels. Dozens are still trapped under buildings. The area is covered by a ceasefire plan brokered by Russia, but the State Department is calling out Russia for not doing more to stop the violence.
Russia must end its support of the Assad regime and its allies. They're responsible for the attacks, for the dire humanitarian situation in East Ghouta, and for the horrendous civilian death toll.
Leaders from around the world are adding their voices.
We are appalled by the escalation.
British Prime Minister Theresa May says the Assad regime has blatantly violated international human rights laws. At least 400,000 people have been killed in Syria's ongoing civil war, a war that is now in its 7th year. Lauren?
400,000. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. A second British child with an illness falls victim to a British court decision. Physicians will remove a ventilator from 21-month-old Alfie Evans against his parents' wishes. He's in a semi-vegetative state. His parents want him transferred to a hospital affiliated with the Vatican in Rome, and they may appeal the government's decision. The Vatican official sent to Chile by Pope Francis to investigate sex abuse allegations has become ill.
He venido a Chile enviado por el Papa Francisco.
Archbishop Charles Scicluna is stable after undergoing gallbladder surgery. He began the journey yesterday to meet with sex abuse victims in Santiago. Scicluna is investigating Bishop Juan Barros, who is accused of ignoring claims of abuse. Pope Francis is under fire for defending the bishop. Francis Roca covers the Vatican for the Wall Street Journal and joins us now from Rome. Welcome back to the program, sir.
Thank you, Lauren. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Why is this trip so important, this trip to Chile?
Well, the Pope has put a lot of importance on. He sent Archbishop Scicluna, who's a person with a great deal of credibility because of his experience as the Vatican's prosecutor for sex abuse, to deal with this matter of Bishop Barros, who's been accused of covering up sex abuse. And as we know, when the Pope was in Chile last month, he really stirred up a lot of controversy by speaking in a way that people thought was insensitively. They thought it was insensitive the way he was speaking about the Barros case, and then by saying that he'd never seen any evidence. He'd never been sent any evidence, and we have people who said that they have sent him evidence via Cardinal O'Malley. So there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of concern, a lot of questions about this, and the Vatican hopes to clear this up by sending Archbishop Scicluna.
He has taken, as you say, a lot of heat. Is this him really trying to gain credibility on this issue? We heard over the weekend that he is beginning again a commission to take a look at sex abuse.
I think so. I mean, that commission, which he started, and they put Cardinal O'Malley, who's someone who's had a lot of experience with this matter in Boston. He put Cardinal O'Malley in charge of the commission, but it was also rocked by controversy. The two sex abuse survivors who sat on that commission both resigned in protest about what they said was inaction. So now this is he's appointed a new slate, a largely new slate of members. Hopes to move ahead with that. But yeah, I think the thought that he was very resistant, that he was dismissive of the accusations against Bishop Barros, and then evidently without taking into account the testimony of these victims down there. So I think the Vatican is saying, look, he's sending the top man on this subject down to Chile and to clear this up.
The mainstream media has really taken this and blown it up, and it's a story that you see on the front page of many papers. Is that fair?
I think it's a very serious question, because it's true that there was a lot of attention to this in the last pontificate. Then it really subsided for a while and didn't get as much media attention. But I have to say, I think that it was largely the Pope himself who stirred this up, because when he went to Chile, he was asked about this by reporters. He was going into a mass. He didn't even have to talk about it. And he said, these people are slandering this bishop. He didn't just say, look, I've considered this matter. I've made my decision. He counterattacked. If the Pope had handled this differently, we'd still be talking about the issue perhaps a bit, but not that much.
Thank you so much for your insights. Francis Roca, Vatican correspondent for The Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.
Coming up, responding to tragedy. Syndicated columnist Star Parker discusses the school shooting in Florida and calls for gun control. Plus, Ohio Catholics appeal to the Vatican to save one of the state's oldest churches. "17 years ago today, Pope John Paul II named Jorge Bergoglio a cardinal. Vatican News marked the anniversary with this video of several important moments in Bergoglio's, now the Pope's, life. You can see the whole video right now on the EWTN News Nightly Facebook page. Students at Marjorie Stoneman High School in Florida are lobbying for gun control after last week's shooting.
So I say, students, stand up for yourselves and stand up for others. We are the future. Let us change the future, and let us do it now.
3 buses took students to the state capitol in Tallahassee. Last week's shooting by a 19-year-old expelled student killed 17. Star Parker joins us now. She is president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
3 students are being hailed by the media for their courage, but you blame students for this shooting. Tell us why.
Well, not necessarily one individual student, but we can call for gun control if we want to as a nation. We can call for more federal laws if we want to as a nation. But usually when you're faced with tragedy, you first check yourself.
How so?
We have forgotten how to just look inwardly. You know, we become such a nation of victims that we forgot to say, wait a minute, what could I have done? Usually,
well, what could these poor students have done?
Well, perhaps said hello. Perhaps said, I'm sorry to hear your dad died. This is a very small community of people we're talking about. This is not the responsibility of Washington, D.C. or the NRA. This is the responsibility of people that are closest to someone to be able to look them in the eye as an individual. See, the challenge with this whole nation of victims is now it's not about us anymore. It's about somebody else. Our problems are somebody else's fault. Well, no, actually, this is a very small community. Someone must have saw his sadness. Someone must have known that his dad died.
This is very un-PC of you to say this after this tragedy. I think many in the media are saying, oh, it's guns, and the media are trying to drive this gun policy debate. What you're saying is that it's local, local, local.
Well, it's insidious what happens when we politicize every issue now. This is really, really tragic for us as a country that so quickly has diminished into a debate about gun control. Are you serious? We haven't even gotten the names yet. We hadn't even let ourselves comprehend what is happening with our students. Why is it that we've so exposed them? You know, I was in a hotel when the news broke, and I thought, wait a minute, this doesn't happen in hotels simply because hotels are one entrance, and they're wide open. The concierge is right there. So is the check-in counter. Maybe we should open up the schools. What we've done is said, okay, they walk into school and they're all by themselves. The administrator's somewhere behind an office door. The principal's behind an office door. They don't even connect with their students. They don't even see their students until they come into the classroom. So I think that maybe we should think about ourselves as a country of people and say, what can we as individuals do and what could we have done to prevent things like this? And one of the things that we can do is we can connect to other individuals.
What do you think about the breakdown of the family? Do you think that that plays into all of these massacres that we're seeing?
Absolutely, to some degree. We have a lot of people who now have a lot of tragedy in their lives because family life has totally collapsed. You know, I run CURE in Washington, D.C., the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. So we look at all the data. I can tell you numbers of how broken we are as a society and how now we've diminished to where husbands married to wives with children, households are at about 18% of the population. So it's really, really bad. But so what happens next? what happens next is society plays a role. And the only role we play as a society, the only place we get to interject our values into somebody else's children's lives is in the classroom, is in the school. So yes, this is where it broke down for this young man. When he went to school, he should have been able to be embraced. That school environment should have known that he had tragedy in his life.
Yet they expelled him.
Well, they expelled him probably because he was acting up. And he was probably acting out because he probably didn't have any friends. No, whoever sat next to him in class, they better not be the ones that are protesting out there today.
Star Parker, president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Thank you for your opinion.
You're welcome.
Residents in Ohio are hoping to save a 171-year-old church from destruction after appeals to the diocese fail. The Diocese of Toledo says closing St. Sebastian Church was a difficult and emotional decision, but a little-known rule in canon law says churches cannot be destroyed if an appeal is before the Holy See. So the parishioners sent the case to Archbishop Christophe Pierre at the Vatican Embassy here in Washington. Both sides are awaiting his decision. Up next, clandestine work and Christianity. We talk about the role faith played for a former CIA spy. And a popular figure. Japan goes wild over one of its Olympic heroes. A new book explores what it's like to be a person of faith while working as a spy. In her memoir, Breaking Cover, Michelle Rigby-Assad describes her life inside the CIA. She says ordinary people can do extraordinary things when their faith is greater than their fear. I'm joined by Michelle now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren.
Fascinating, fascinating book. And in this book, you reference God. Look at all of these times you reference God. I did some sticky notes here. You say when you were undercover, you went into anaphylactic shock in a foreign country. You reference God by saying, "Why didn't you protect me?" You said, "Instead of freaking out about this thing, I prayed to God." What did you learn about your faith while you were a spy undercover?
So I learned that I really had to hold on to that faith because, Lauren, there were so many situations where we were in danger or it was a crazy career, you know, living undercover in dangerous parts of the world. But it was most important that I held on to that faith when I didn't understand what I was doing or why I was there.
And this is you and your husband, is that right? Right here?
Yes.
We're seeing some pictures of you. Oh, there's you with that big gold gun. And so you really were in the thick of this with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS. You were battling with them. You said that when that happened, you were also very scared. And how did God help you through those really scary times?
So I really realized that when God opens a door, no matter how scary it is, you've got to walk through it. Because if you wait until the moment in which you feel completely capable, or you wait until the fear subsides, you'll never move forward. And so I got very good at exercising that courage and walking into places that completely intimidated me, or that were very times when I felt very fearful.
Sure. Yeah. When you left, you finally left after 10 years, you and your husband said, "That's enough, we're out of there." And then you decided you wanted to help persecuted Christians in Iraq leave Iraq. You were working at the Hudson Institute. What did you do? You interviewed them, and tell us the story briefly of Haman.
Yes. So we were part of a group of Christians who said, we've got to do something to help these persecuted Iraqis who've been displaced by ISIS. So we were an informal group of people, and we were asked to operationalize this project. And so it was quite miraculous.
Operationalize, meaning get it going.
Yeah, we had to vet these people, and we had to be sure we weren't going to bring ISIS into a receiving country. And then we had to use our diplomatic skills to find a country willing to take these people. And eventually we did find Slovakia. And miraculously, after only about 4 months of working on this project, we successfully airlifted 149 Christians out of northern Iraq to their new homes in Slovakia.
We're looking at some of them right here. So you were responsible for making sure that none of them were terrorists.
Yes.
You know, our current immigration system is under fire. Do you think, very quickly, we have to go, I could talk to you all day, very quickly, do you think that that is justified?
Absolutely, but we could do a much better job of vetting people, and so that requires better training and better hiring to get people in that know how to do that.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle Rigby-Assad. Breaking Cover is the name of the book, My Secret Life in the CIA and What It Taught Me About What's Worth Fighting For. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
At the Olympics, American Lindsey Vonn earned a bronze medal in the women's downhill, while Italy's Sofia Goggia won gold. Russians took the lead in women's figure skating, and the Czech Republic bounced the U.S. men's hockey team from competition. Here's our medal count. Norway, 33, Germany, 24, Canada, 21, and the Netherlands is tied with the United States with 16. Finally, tonight, fans in Tokyo flocked to buy a postage stamp of gold medalist Yuzuru Hanyu. He won back-to-back Olympic titles in figure skating. He's the first man to do so since 1952. Hanyu overcame a serious ankle injury to win this year, yet he remains humble. In one news conference, Hanyu thanked journalists, in 5 different languages. And I, as you heard, can barely get out one. All right, that does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.